Okay, so today we're going to be going over the stuff that food is made of, other than vitamins and nutrients. I'm going to exclude fiber from this. We've already talked about fiber. I don't know why I have my mask on. We've already talked about fiber. Fiber is going to be the material that your body cannot digest. And so your body actually pushes that out as waste. And it allows your body to comfortably release its waste, release feces, and it becomes part of your feces. And it's almost like a lubricant to keep the poop flowing out nice and smooth and not be like chunky and dry and gross. So these are going to be the three major things that our body absorbs from food other than vitamins and nutrients. So I want to start with you guys answering these three questions. What does protein do for you? And is protein good for you? What do carbohydrates do for you? And are carbohydrates good for you? And then finally, what do fats do for you? And are fats good for you? Okay? So let's get right into it. So basic healthy diet, what should your plate look like? Half or more of your plate when you make a meal, yeah, I'm sure you heard this, should be fruits and vegetables. Mostly vegetables, okay? So, I know this sounds like, oh yeah, fruits and vegetables. Seriously, if you want to live a long and healthy life and also feel good all the time, you'll make sure that most of the food that you eat is vegetables. Other than that, the other portion of the plate should be mostly whole grains. And then a small portion should be some type of protein. So in that case, if you are a vegetarian, probably some type of bean-based thing. Or if you are a meat eater, some type of meat. Preferably white meat. So you should also cut back on salt, sugar, solid fats. And this is, depending on your weight, your age, your gender, your physical activity. Your diet should be between somewhere 2,000 and 3,000 calories, depending on your body and a lot of other factors. So protein. What is protein? Protein is like a building block. I like to think of protein as Legos, right? So if we have like a group of Legos, that would be like a protein. And when we take off the individual Legos, those are our amino acids. So when we eat food, we're taking in protein, and that protein is broken into these different pieces and then put into our bloodstream. Those different pieces, kind of like, you see, this would be like our protein. Our body digests these little bonds here, peptide bonds, and these break into amino acids, and those can be then built into other proteins depending on what our body needs. Like for skin, your nails, your hair, your bones, your ligaments, that'd be like collagen, which is a specific protein. Vitamin C helps our bodies produce protein, just so you know. So vitamin C is very important for that. Some good sources of protein. All of these examples have protein in them. Some have less, some have more, but then a healthy or a good source of protein would be seafood, white meats. White meats includes chicken, turkey, really just like birds. Milk, cheese, yogurt. By the way, cheese and yogurt are really, kind of made from milk, and you're going to want the lower fat version of these, but the fat isn't necessarily bad for you. And then beans are also a great source of protein. Poor sources of protein are unhealthy sources of protein. Nuts are a healthy version, but they're mostly fat. They're not as much protein as people talk about them as. They definitely have protein in them, but not as much as they're like talked about. And then like ground red meat, or just red meat in general that's high in fat, that's gonna be a poor source of protein compared to all the bad stuff that comes with it. Now, ground red meat that is like natural and like, free roaming, those are happy animals. You want to eat happy animals, and you don't want to eat animals that are tortured. So animals that are kept in one spot, not moving much, or don't really ever get outside or eat grass if they are cows, right? You really just want happy animals if you're going to eat happy animals. So let's take a little poll. Which is the good source of protein? The peanuts or the yogurt? Try this poll. What is the better source of protein? Chicken or cow? All right. So carbs or carbohydrates, the way you could think about carbs is carbs by the end of the time we digest them, become sugars. And even just straight up sugar, whether that's glucose, sucrose, lactose, right? These are all examples of sugar, and they're going to be converted into energy. So we need carbs. Humans need carbs. But luckily, a lot or almost all foods come with carbs. So a bad example of a carb would be like white bread. Things that have been bleached or things that have been stripped of all of their major nutrients and just are straight up simple carbohydrates. Complex carbs take longer to digest because they're longer chains, and they give you a steady release of energy. There's no real sugar high that comes with this unless we eat a ton of complex carbohydrates. These are usually going to be like brown grains, brown rice, whole wheat. They're brown in color. Which is the example of the good carb or the healthier carb. All right. Finally, we're going to talk about fats. So, fats are really, really good for you for the most part. There are some specific fats that are really bad for you, like trans fat. But fats, you think that like if I eat fat, I'm going to get fat. No. If you eat a lot of simple sugars or simple carbohydrates, that is what leads to fat, because that energy is then stored if you don't use it. And that storage is fat. Okay? Fats don't always just turn into fat. Our body needs fats in order to have almost all of its major functions to occur. All right? So fats are really, really good for you. So the main point behind good fats versus bad fats is that first, trans fat is really the only really bad fat. Butter, for example, is solid at room temperature. Olive oil and vegetable oil is liquid at room temperature. Now, this rule doesn't always work, but in general, this is called a saturated fat, and this is an unsaturated fat. Okay? So a saturated fat means that it's solid at room temperature, and the chemicals that make it up have an elbow in them, so they get stuck easier than the ones that have straight chemicals that make them up. They're less likely to get caught on each other, and that has to do with your heart. But you don't really have to worry about that at this young age. Main point: good source of fats can be the unsaturated fats and monosaturated fats. Look at the back of the label of food. See which one they have more of. Saturated fats are okay for you. I know it says bad source. They're okay for you, but you just can't have tons of them. You got to restrict that. Trans fat is fat that is the worst type of fat. You definitely don't want to eat any trans fat, ever. Never. Okay? So that's the general information behind the food that we eat. We're going to dive more into this with the nurse.